So without further ado, I'll give you a very quick intro to Evelyn. For anyone who doesn't know Evelyn, she is CEO of Scottish EDGE and has been since 2014.
Yep.
Feel free to fact correct me on any of this if it's not right. Before then, she was part of the Prince's Trust Scottish Youth Business. Is that order?
Yeah. Prince's Scottish Youth Business Trust. When you work there a long time, it just trips off the
tongue. And that was for a total of around 23, 24 years in total. Before then, you did a BA in Communications, Glasgow Caledonian, which we'll be touching on later on as well. So with Scottish EDGE, I know a lot of you know about Scottish EDGE already. Just a reminder, so they've awarded more than 14 million to 369 businesses. I know you've probably heard this tons of times, and only a team of 7, I believe.
Yes.
Even more impressive as well. So without further ado, get into the first questions. So I thought where we start, quite naturally would be, I guess, your background, Evelyn, and I guess to your kind of early education with communications. Was that something that you had an interest with from school, or was that something that developed later on?
Yeah, well, when I was young, I absolutely loved adverts. I loved watching adverts, often more than TV programmes, and their ability to tell stories in really, short space of time. So when I went to study communications, I was really interested in getting into advertising and into public relations. So that was where my initial focus was, and actually my first job was in internal communications. So I worked for a company called Heatwise, which is now part of the Wise Group in Glasgow, and they had 470 staff, and my job was to communicate with the 470 staff. And that was great fun, so set up a newspaper that we sent out. We would run courses for the staff, did all sort of leaflets about different benefits, shadowed the staff to look at what their issues were, and generally had a fun time on that job. But my next job, which I went into, again with the thought of helping them with their communications, was at Glasgow Opportunities, who were an enterprise trust, and they were working with businesses, and that's where I got really interested in business.
Fantastic. And I was doing a bit of research before in previous interviews you've given, and one thing you mentioned, so I was speaking to ask you, was about how obviously getting into business support was something you became quite passionate about. I guess looking back, if you'd had maybe a opportunity to move into communications, would that have been something you maybe would have done instead, or
no? No, I think absolutely no. I think I realised, and gosh, it might be someone who's in PR or advertising, but there didn't seem to be, ultimately, I liked internal communications where you were helping employees potentially have a better experience. But in terms of external communications and PR, actually, when I came up against it, it felt a little bit empty to me. It didn't kind of excite me in the way that I thought it would. Although what I did do, when I got really interested in business, I thought that in order to learn about business, that I should run my own business. So taking what I learned, myself and my business partner at the time, ran a small PR company for 2 years. So that way I learned a lot about business through doing that. And that was a lot of fun actually, because all we did was PR for bands. So what we did was we approached record companies, mainly in London, and we would get them to pay us a retainer to promote their acts, their Scottish acts in Scotland and outside of Scotland. So that was really good fun.
Fantastic. And I remember you mentioned there was maybe not a story, but a reason behind the name as well?
Yeah, so that was called Rosebud Press and Publicity, because my business partner and I were a big fan of Orson Welles films, so that was where that came from. So anybody watch Citizen Kane? So yeah, that was where Rosebud came from. So although it sounded like a very kind of, I don't know, it was maybe not the best name, but you had a story around it. So.
Absolutely. And I guess on the kind of subject of running your own business and how that carries it over into supporting businesses, are there any, I guess, particular, skills or even actually experiences from running your own business that has really helped you from the other side when it comes to supporting?
Yeah, I think it absolutely does. And I mean, what I would say is that I view Scottish EDGE very much as a business. So, you know, I think people maybe know the history of Scottish EDGE, which is that it started as Scottish Enterprise. It was an idea of the Scottish Government, and they asked Scottish Enterprise to come up with the competition. And they did a brilliant job of that, and you know, came up with the competition, came up with the name, and so many aspects of what the idea around that we've stuck with. So they did a great job, but after 4 rounds, and they made some mistakes as well, which we were able to learn from, but after 4 rounds they pushed it out to the private sector, and that's when I got involved. So at the time there was an existing competition, but no vehicle at all to run it. So the day that I started at Scottish EDGE, there was nothing. There was no company, no money, no office, no IT, no staff. So exactly the same as all of you here that are setting up startups, exactly the same. And that is terrifying, actually. It's terrifying, that sort of blank sheet of paper. I mean, I at least, you know, I knew what we were going to do, and I had some resources. I still had to, so I had promises of money, but no actual cash, no bank account, nothing. And just that, starting that first day, opening the door. I borrowed an office from someone and opening the door, and I borrowed my husband's laptop and going into the office and sitting down and thinking, well, you can probably guess what I think. Maybe, maybe not say it out loud, but and I think that's true of everybody here when you get started. That, and so I think I can take that experience and the other experience I had many years ago when I was much younger. You know, at the end of the day, as business people, we come up against a lot of the same problems and issues over and over again. And that's why I think these kinds of things are really key, because that's how you learn. You know, I mean, we had an event recently where the entire night was just spent talking about hiring staffs and the ins and outs and ups and downs of hiring staff, and when people had made mistakes and how they learned from their mistakes and so on, and just telling each other stories. And there were some people that were, you know, maybe only had tiny teams, but were still, you know, hoping to grow them in the future, and you could see that they were scribbling like crazy, you know, and just taking all those learnings on board. So yeah, I think you learn a lot from doing, and you learn a lot from listening to people that have done it as well.
Absolutely. And I guess going back to the team, and I mentioned very briefly in the intro, so you guys as a team are only 7.
Yeah, but I mean, that's amazing. 7's huge amounts. I mean, there was only 2 of us to start off with. So at the very beginning, it was myself and Stephen Hamill, who's our Chief Operating Officer, also known in our office as the most organised man in Scotland. And in fact, anybody that's ever had anything to do with him would, you know, it should actually be a hashtag after his name. So fortunately, me and the most organised man in Scotland were able to cope with doing absolutely everything around the competition to start off with, but very quickly, you know, we needed to start building a team, and to actually have 7 now just feels like a dream. You know, it's just like, wow. Now I can look around and think, you can pick that up, which is brilliant, as you know.
Oh, fantastic. And I guess one thing I was really keen to ask as well was, I understand that, I'm going to get the order on again. We call it Princess Trust for sure.
Yeah,
is that okay?
Yeah, no, you can call. Well, no, you can't
Princess
call it Princess
Trust.
Trust actually, because the Princess Scottish Youth Business Trust was. Excuse me for boring everyone a minute. It was an independent Scottish charity focused entirely on supporting young people in business, and it was a wonderful organisation, which is why I spent so much time there. And when the there was a decision taken that the Prince was involved in too many things, and so they started merging his charities. And so we merged with the Princess Trust, or as the staff called it, hostile takeover. And it changed completely. And most of us left. I think 43 of us 2P'd over, and there's only 3 of those staff left after 7 years. So the organisation has been taken apart and doesn't exist any longer, which is a real shame. However, I think an awful lot of what I learned at that organisation I've taken into Scottish EDGE, and other people. So Margaret Gibson, who runs the Ernst & Young Foundation, has taken so much from PSYBT into that job and is making a fantastic impact across the UK. Jeff Leask, who runs Young Enterprise Scotland, also was, a PSYBT senior manager, has also taken all those learnings into Young Enterprise Scotland. So we like to think that the sort of culture of that organisation, the good work that organisation did, although it no longer exists, actually percolates throughout other businesses and organisations. And actually what I would say is that we talk a lot these days about how important culture is. To give you an example of what a brilliant culture that organisation hasn't existed in any way, shape or form for 7 years, but the team are still getting together for Christmas drinks. Now, how amazing is that? I mean, some offices you can't even get the people in the office right now to go for Christmas drinks, and we can get about half the staff at PSYBT to meet up for Christmas drinks, which is just shows you if you build a really strong culture and you harness people around a vision, what you can actually achieve in terms of the culture.
Fantastic. Absolutely agree, Evelyn. And I guess one thing I was keen to almost segue into was what you look for in Scottish EDGE applicants. Is culture something that is quite important on an application, or maybe that's potentially too early stage? Yeah,
maybe it's a little bit early for us to look at that, but one of the things we do with all of our winners, so we run a number of alumni engagement events. Back to that whole thing is, I think what you're doing here is great. I think getting people together to chat and interact and get to know each other is really important. But we decided to sort of have all of our alumni events around a theme of running a good company. So to consider the impact of your company on your staff, on your customers, on your suppliers, on the environment, and what can you do within your business to actually do something that's positive, that's good. So, I mean, of course, you have to make money in business, but, what's wrong with donating a proportion of that to charity? What's wrong with sharing that with your staff? What's wrong with, trying to make sure that the product and service you provide is offering good value for money for your customers? You can be motivated, and I believe you should be motivated more than just what you get out of it. That's not to say if people work hard, they shouldn't be rewarded, but I think you get more of a kick out of all those other aspects. And in fact, what they're saying now is that organisations that put purpose at the heart of what they do are more successful. Because again, you can get your team everyone can buy into that. So.
Absolutely agree. And I know you've spoken before as well about entrepreneurs themselves and how different characteristics are actually very, very important. One of them you mentioned before was niceness, which I really like actually, because nowadays a lot of it's all about do you have skills up in finance, or do you know your market, do you know your products? But something like that is actually, I guess.
Yeah, I think not being an asshole in business is really important, and I think that because at the end of the day, so if you start up, and I know some people in here are already in businesses or have just started businesses, then you're pretty much on your own right at the outset. And you are going to have to build advisors around you, a team around you, you're going to have to raise money, you're going to have to engage with customers, you're going to have to pull an awful lot of people towards you in order to make your business work. And so I think actually that the quality, what I see is that people that are nice can actually, it's an undervalued thing. I think can do that sort of really well. They can engage people really well around them and around what they do. So I think, I'm not saying put that on if that's not you. Be yourself. But if that is something that you've got a tendency towards, then amplify it, because that's actually, you know, people respond well, I think, to people that are polite and friendly and keen to engage. So, an underrated quality, I think, niceness.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely agree. I guess one thing I was keen to ask about your thoughts on, I guess, on that topic in a sense, in terms of soft skills. Is that something when you were building your team you looked out for more, or was it more to do with previous experience, or obviously it depends per position, but
no, it's really, really important to me, and I think I've got a really fantastic team, and I think all of them are just great people and nice people and really care. So, you know, if I look at amongst our team, we've got 4 people that are, if you like, our frontline staff that deal the most with the businesses. And I would say that the key thing about all of them is that they genuinely want the businesses they work with to succeed. They really care about how they respond to the feedback, whether the feedback's helpful, what they can do to engage and connect them. You know, so one of the things that I talk about in the early days, so Stephen and I, when we came in and started Scottish EDGE, so he was right at the very beginning with me, we sat down and thought, okay, we're running a competition and we're going to say no to 90% of our customers. And so how do we deal with that? Because we're the type of people that like to say yes, and we like to be enthusiastic and committed and caring. So how do we cope with the fact that we're going to be saying no, and only 10% of our customers are actually going to get funding and support? So that was why we came up with the idea of giving everyone feedback. So we thought, okay, how do we add value? So we sat down and looked at it and thought, okay, how do we add value? What difference are we actually going to make to the businesses? If someone is going to take, and it varies dramatically, but most people say to us it takes at least half a day to do a Scottish EDGE application and maybe another half a day to script and film a video. So if somebody's giving up a day of their life, and that's probably a minimum, you want to give something back for that. So that sort of focus on giving something back was sort of set out right from the outset. And so I think that is through all of the team. And whenever someone comes to me and says, oh, should we be doing this? And I'll say, well, is it going to be helpful to the customer? And they think, well, yeah. I go, okay. And they say, well, it might be quite a lot of hassle. Is it going to be helpful to the customer? If it's going to be helpful to the customer, let's take the hassle. And I think the good thing is that the team that I've got on board, again, that's back to what your culture is and your values. I think all of the team buy into that, so it means that they are prepared to go the extra mile, because I think they know that that's what's expected in the organisation.
Absolutely, and it kind of brings us nicely actually into, I guess, maybe best practice for EDGE applications.
Yeah, I was waiting for the how do I win EDGE question.
I know, I was going to open with that actually. You know. The easy one to start. How do you win EDGE? I might cheat a bit with this and ask, obviously you don't have to be specific, but any best practices and also common things not to do. So things that are quite common that actually...
Oh, right, okay.
Or kind of definitely not to do that people end up doing.
Well, I think in terms of how to win EDGE, I think the important thing is to take advantage of the resources that are available. So we run application workshops, which I recommend to everybody to come along to. We also have example application forms, we have example videos, we have a competition brochure, and you can get in touch with the team. We don't kind of shout that from the rooftops, because we probably couldn't sit down and advise all 225 to 290 applications, but you can do that as well. If you're in the middle of filling out your application form and you think, do you know what, I don't think I really know what to put here, you can just pick up the phone one of us, and because would it help the customer, we'll take the call, we'll chat it through with you. So I think that there's I think take advantage of the resources. The other thing is that we're very clear in all of our communications that we judge the applications against 6 assessment criteria. So read through the assessment criteria, and then the questions lead you to, so it's like entrepreneurial spirit, which is one of the assessment criteria where you get marked out of 5. In the application form, it's like, tell us about yourself, tell us about your team, tell us about your advisors, what skills are missing from your team, who would be your first hire. We're kind of leading you towards giving us the answer so that we can then score you in that. Same with innovation, where we ask questions around it so that we can get to what's the unique aspect of your product. What's the thing that's going to make it stand out? What's the thing that customers are going to reach for? We then do application workshops for people that are pitching. We get them along. They can do pitch practices. Again, they could come in and pitch in front of the team. Johnson Carmichael run pitch practice days that you can go. So I think we try and do what we can. However, even if you do all of that, you still have to accept that it's a competition. What I would say is we had 56 fantastic semi-finalists, and we picked 27 people to go to the next stage. There were a few businesses in there that were good enough, but just because it's a competition, you just have to narrow it down. It was the same at our Young Edge and Wildcard Edge competitions that this time were so tough. I know with the Young Edge one, the judges sat for about an hour debating the final place because there were 3 businesses that were all worthy of support. So there is also an element of, sorry, we just don't have enough money to go around to everybody. It is a competition, and there's only so many people that can get support. But then what we say is, please try again, and hopefully you'll win next time.
And that's something I was, again, really keen to ask in terms of, is that something you see a lot of applicants who maybe not successful coming back, trying again with a big improvement? Or is that maybe only a...
Yes, so there's a proportion of, so with every EDGE round, there's a proportion of EDGE applicants that come back. But actually, in the last round, that went down slightly. And we think it might be that because the previous round, we'd got 289 applications, which was our highest ever number, and only 31 people won. And I think, unfortunately, that then gave people the feeling that, God, this is so difficult to win. And so I think that might have affected people coming back, which again is, that's fair enough. I do get that. Although what we try to make it easy for people to come back. So it's an online application process. So if you've applied already, you go in, half of your information's there already. You can use your old application form. So we try to make it simple for people to come back in, because again, we always recognise and respect the work that it takes.
Absolutely. And one thing I was, again, keen to come into was the EDGE pledge. As,
yes.
I guess kind of reinvesting and really helping to, I guess, help future applicants, essentially, as that goal.
Yeah, so we came up with this idea because originally there was discussion at our board about, should we take a percentage of, should there be any percentage taken for the money that we put in? So Dragon's Den, we'll have 10%. But it was never going to be anything like that. I think we were looking at 1%. And I wasn't really keen on the idea, if I'm honest, because I think that's not what EDGE is about. It's about trying to lift people up, but keep that part available for them to raise more money when they need it. So we did a lot of research around this. We spoke to loads of people. So I spoke to people involved in all the business angel networks across Scotland. Spoke to people in VCs, spoke to Scottish Investment Bank, back and forward, and also spoke to our clients. And so I was on the phone to Callie Russell, who runs Molesey in Edinburgh, who was one of our early winners, round 2 winner, and he was sort of chatting and saying, no, I don't think that's a good idea for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I said, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea either, but I'd like to come up with some way in which EDGE could potentially benefit for the benefit of future entrepreneurs. And so he said, well, if you looked at the Founders Pledge, and I hadn't, so I went away and looked at that, and essentially that's an initiative in London which they get tech businesses to sign up to, and you can donate up to 5% of your proceeds from exit to charities of your choice. So I thought, brilliant, I'm just going to steal that idea and we'll call it the EDGE Pledge, and we'll make it 1%, which was what we'd been talking about at the board, and we'll ask people to donate 1% on exit to EDGE so that we can recycle that money and keep supporting businesses in the future. And to date we've had 75 of our winners sign up for that, and we have also cashed in our first pledge. So the first pledger is going to give us £36,000, so that's nice. And we're also keeping an eye on a couple of businesses that we know will exit probably in the next couple of years, and that could be good for EDGE. And the thinking behind that is that it's just all about keeping it going. I mean, the reason that we decided to introduce loans at Scottish EDGE and not just focus on grants is because we wanted to create something that could keep going and that people would continue to benefit from. And that's the thinking of the EDGE Pledge as well. This is a good competition for people right now. Let's make sure people in the future can benefit as well, and the EDGE Pledge is a nice way to do that.
Fantastic, and it kind of speaks nicely about the kind of ecosystem in general in Scotland. And one thing I was keen to ask as well was, I guess, speaking about London, and I know Silicon Valley is always a kind of easy comparison to, from a kind of wider angle. One thing I was really keen to ask you was, obviously Scotland, Edinburgh specifically, seems to be a really thriving hub for startups. What can we do better? What can we do to really help bridge that gap between maybe London, for instance, as best we can?
Well, I think that in Scotland we're incredibly lucky with the business support that we have here and with the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I think we also, I think Edinburgh and Glasgow increasingly, attracts and retains a lot of talent. And I think people can choose to come and work in Edinburgh and Glasgow now because, in particular, and hopefully Aberdeen as it's developing, because they see the opportunity to, rent, premises at a decent rate, find great talent within the city and actually be part of a sort of thriving ecosystem. So those are the positive things. But I would say on the downside, although we're very lucky to have, the Scottish Investment Bank here, we're very lucky to have a strong network of business angels and some significant VCs. There's a massive difference between the amount of money that you can raise in Scotland and what you can raise in London, and I think that's a big challenge. So I see similar ideas in Scotland raising 250,000, and the same idea just about is getting 1.5 million, and that's just the reality. And there are some new players that have just come into Edinburgh recently who are really making a bit of a dent in that. And I know the British Business Bank is looking into availability of finance, because it's not just Scotland that's an issue, and it's other parts of the UK where there is that big discrepancy. But I think, I think that's the difference. So one of the things we do say to our winners is that if you are raising further finance to grow, don't just focus on Scotland. You have to take a UK-wide approach, and also consider, different sources of funding as well. Look at crowdfunding, look at alternative ways of supporting your business. So I would say that that's a challenge. And of course, am I really going to mention the B word? But the other issue, obviously there is a huge concern around Brexit and the impact that could potentially have on availability of talent in Scotland. And I know that the Scottish Government, are arguing that, they would like to take control of their own immigration policies, because obviously in Scotland that ability to retain and attract talent is incredibly important to us, and incredibly important, I would say, in the entrepreneurship area. So these are the challenges I think we have. And I'm sure there's others, but that's
and it'll be a longer interview, I suppose. Anyway, I guess taking ourselves to 5 years' time, post-Brexit maybe, we'll find out. Not to get political at all, but it's going to sound a lot like an interview question, which, as in like a job interview question, obviously an interview question because it's an interview, but where would you see where do you see, Scottish Edge going in 5 years' time? And one thing I'm keen to kind of delve into is the types of businesses or the ideas that applicants have in terms of trends or sustainability, for instance, being a big topic nowadays. Are there any similar areas that you can see regrowing?
I think that we already support businesses across a huge range of sectors, and obviously with our focus on innovation, we are seeing the businesses of tomorrow today. But I think that there will be more businesses probably coming forward in renewables. I think there's going to be a lot in this sort of drive towards carbon neutral. There's going to be a lot more on circular economy, so I think that those are opportunities. There's going to be a lot on Industry 4.0 and how that's, so can people sort of innovate in that area? And I think, and a lot around sort of different forms of energy. We're also seeing increasingly in Scottish Edge life sciences businesses and businesses trying to tackle issues, issues around the NHS. I suppose what we have the opportunity in Scotland within the entrepreneurial network, and how exciting it would be if we can in Scotland tackle the problems that we see here in this country, but come up with solutions that could potentially be exported across the UK and beyond. So a good example of that is a business that I've personally been hugely excited about since I first read the application, which is called Trtl Energy, who are based up north at the moment. And they've come up with what I think, and actually a lot of people think, is just a brilliant answer to on-street charging for electric vehicles. So if we are going to go down the route where we're all driving electric vehicles, how do we charge them? That is an ongoing issue. And what we don't want to be doing is putting charging points in every street in the same way that we have lampposts and cluttering things up and so on. So we need to consider how that's going to work. So, cut a long story short, Trtl Energy have come up with a fantastic solution. Innovate UK are supporting them at present. It looks as if they will be ready to start piloting that on the streets of Edinburgh in 2021. Down south, I think Brent and Manchester councils next year. And there is a race to solve that problem, and wouldn't it be wonderful if a Scottish company solves that problem, and that is the solution that we go forward with across the whole of the UK and potentially beyond. And similarly with, if you look at Current, or formerly Snap 40, who've come up with what is currently the top vital signs monitor in the world, and that's developed here in Scotland. So I guess what I would love, if I could wave a magic wand, is I would love it if the businesses at Edge continue to innovate in the way that they do and solve today's challenges for the benefit of our country, but of other people as well. So that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Be superb, yeah. Absolutely. And one stat I think I saw this week was, I think it's around 49-50% of Scots would consider starting a business. It might be correct, it might not be, but I guess if it is true, we'll say it is for now. Do you see there being any big barriers for individuals maybe having the courage to start? Because obviously having an idea for a problem is obviously the first step. Do you think there's a big kind of gap or something stopping people taking that leap? And is there anything we can do to
Well, I think finance is always an issue with this. It's like people, the reality is that it's expensive to start a business, or many businesses, not all businesses. But it can be expensive, it's time consuming. Most people have to live on next to nothing while they do it. And it's a huge amount of hard work. I mean, there's a big myth around people being self-employed and being able to just be really flexible with their time. They can just nip home at lunchtime and watch a box set, or head off for the weekend whenever they feel like it. Absolute nonsense. The people that I know that are self-employed work ridiculous hours. I mean, usually enjoy doing so because they're passionate about what they do, but usually they work ridiculous hours, take next to nothing because every penny is in the business, and you know, they can't draw out any finance for themselves. So I think those are issues. I think we have to be realistic about those. But then those are the downsides. The upsides is it's very rare to meet someone in business who isn't actually loving the journey and loving, you know, doing what they're doing. So I think, you know, they can often deal with the bad aspects because of the fact that they have that flexibility and freedom and they're pursuing a passion. So I think there's ups and downs. But yes, finance is a challenge, and that's why we're here, and also why when we give feedback, if we can't support, we do try and signpost people to other sources of finance, and encourage people to explore other sources of finance to try and get what they need to take their business forward.
Absolutely. I guess on finance as well, and maybe coming around to pitching, I don't want to repeat the same question, best pitch advice, worst pitch advice, but if I could, if that's okay, one thing not to do when pitching, and then one thing to do. If that's okay, I know it's kind of like a very similar question.
Well, actually, one thing I would like to say is that Scottish EDGE is not a pitching competition. So we do try and get that over. And people think that's a bit odd because obviously pitching is part of it. You have to do a pitch video, you have to pitch at the semi-final, you have to pitch at the final. But what I mean about that is that if you're not brilliant at pitching but you've got a brilliant business, you'll win. You know, if you're brilliant at pitching and you've frankly got something that's, you know, barely holds together, you won't win. So it's a business competition, but it does help if you can get over your pitch. And I suppose the key thing I say to people is, I guess the most important thing is not to sort of disengage with the audience. I guess that's the key thing. I mean, a lot of people come in and they memorise their pitch and they try and just do it, you know, just do it off the top of their head. And I've seen that go horribly wrong at times because, you know, if you stumble over one word, it can throw the whole thing off. So we do say to people, please bring in notes, because again, it's not a pitching competition. There's nothing wrong with coming in and reading off your notes. But then what we do sometimes see is people come in, they look at the judges, they're absolutely terrified, and then they just do that, and they just disengage. But even then, I mean, I do remember we gave money to someone who came in and he tried on 3 separate occasions to get through his pitch, couldn't get through his pitch, and the judges just said, look, just sit down and chat to us. And so we just took the 10 minutes to ask him the Q&A, and he won. Because at the end of the day, it's not kind of about that. But worst pitch, no, I won't talk about a worst pitch. But I think the best pitch, because funny enough, we were talking recently about, because it's 5 years at Scottish EDGE, I should write a blog about the sort of best pitches we've seen. Although we did chat about, would that give people the idea that it's all, you know, it's all about the pitches, because it's really not. But so we were chatting about favourite pitches, and I think mine was James McElroy from Enterobiotics. Has anyone heard of Enterobiotics? Yep. Okay. Sorry?
He's a great guy.
He is a great guy. So James was training as a doctor, and he had been on a night shift in a hospital ward, and a couple of patients were dying of C. difficile infection. And it was terribly upsetting, because obviously he, you know, as a junior doctor, he was facing these people dying on his watch. And C. difficile is a hospital-acquired infection, so he went back home that night, didn't sleep, and spent the whole night on Google thinking, how can we there must be another way to cure this, because at the moment you get a set of actually very expensive antibiotics which often don't work, and then you have to get another set of antibiotics, and if they don't work, you die. So he went home, spent the night on the computer, and discovered this treatment which is called fecal microbiotic transplant, and essentially it's taking the poo of very healthy people, which is, you know, populated with their very healthy bacteria, and taking it in, you know, someone else taking that into their gut and then the healthy bacteria kills the C. difficile infection, and it starts to work really quite dramatically within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So he then decided that he was going to set up the first poo bank in Scotland. I know it sounds funny, but actually the way he told it. So he came in to say that he needed the money to start this process. He's now successfully completed that process. Mm. He came back and won Scottish EDGE. But at the time he came into Young EDGE, still training as a junior doctor. And he was so passionate that he wanted to make a difference. Mm. He knew how hard it was going to be. He'd worked out all the steps. He knew how much money it was going to take. It was like shooting for the stars. Mm. But he came in, he did his 3 minutes, he did his 7 minutes Q&A, and then he walked out the room, and I looked at, so there was 5 judges, and I looked at the 5 judges, and they were all like this. And it took them about 60 seconds, and then they all, almost at the same time, sat back and went, wow. And it was just the strength of his passion, and actually also the strength of the idea, the research that he'd done, the journey that he was going to take. And so I think that just stands out in my mind as one of the most amazing pitches. And what I always say to people, I guess my key thing is, if you are incredibly passionate about what you do, please let it show, because people love that. You know, that's, you know, we all tune into that, you know. It makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, yeah. It kind of makes you more human, I guess. You know, more ways.
Yeah. So, you know, and you know, I think we continued to invest in James. We've continued to stay close to him. He's now come and judged for us, and he was definitely someone worth investing in. And that's so key, because if I look back over 5 years at EDGE, and obviously we've helped a lot of innovative businesses, and some of them have gone stratospheric, some haven't really taken off in the way that the people have hoped, and that's disappointing. But usually what we can see is you know, if people say, was it the idea, was it the team, it tends to be it's the team that have struggled to actually take that for whatever reason they've struggled to move the business forward, and that's been the issue rather than the quality of the idea.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Quite a nice one to, I guess, end on from the EDGE point of view. One thing, I guess, going back to the kind of human side of it and telling stories and I guess being relatable to an extent. I know we chatted very briefly before. So one question which I think could be quite good is, what's one thing that people don't know about you that you'd be keen to share?
Well, I mentioned earlier that, you know, when I was much younger, that I had run a business. So anyway, the business partner I ended up marrying, and he became a music journalist. So the one thing people don't know about me, I think, is that in actually the same year that I took over EDGE, so I was facing all the challenges of having a startup, my husband and I decided to turn our living room into a venue. And over the course of 10 months in total, it was 8 months actually, we had 10 different concerts. But the one that people still keep talking about is that we had Simple Minds play in our living room. So you can't search it up on YouTube, it's had hundreds of thousands of views now. So that was possibly the most surreal thing that's happened to me in my life, is that I'm answering the door and Simple Minds are coming up the stairs. I live in a close, you know, I live in a flat in Glasgow. And the first thing Jim Kerr said to me is, I'm sorry, Evelyn, I forgot to bring a carry-out. And I said, no, it's fine, we've got plenty alcohol in the house. And they then went in, set up in the living room, and I managed to cram 51 people into my living room, and they just played the most amazing set. So, you know, they played Don't You Forget About Me. They actually played Riders on the Storm, the Doors songs, Alive and Kicking. And if you watch the video, I'm sitting in my couch, just grinning like a fool. I'm sitting there thinking, I can't believe they're in my living room. You know, I just look so yeah. So we also had a 12-piece mariachi band from LA. They were fantastic, and they managed to fit in the living room as well. We had the Vamps, which my teenage children loved. Various things like that. We had the View, although the guy from the View was so drunk that straight after the gig he threw up in my clothes, so he didn't get invited back. But anyway, to cut a long story short, we did this for 8 months, and then for years and years and years, so I live in this ancient flat in Glasgow. For years and years we'd been trying to get money to do up the building, and we just managed to secure the grant at the end of this 8-month period, and we had to put the whole thing on hold to do up the building, which then ended up taking 2 years, and we just never went back to it. So we keep talking about it, but maybe one day we'll have a reunion gig in there.
Oh, maybe this could be the big announcement, the relaunch.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yep.
Oh, super. So I think that's probably one of the best answers possibly end on. But we do have a bit of time. Anyone who's keen to ask some questions? Great. Jonathan?
Yeah, I kind of start to transition away from that first and foremost, because that's the best answer I've ever heard to a tell us something interesting about it. That's amazing. One, would Edge fund that idea? But two,
sadly no.
Yeah, before you transition away, how have you found, because effectively Edge itself, when you first came, it is your own startup to some degree. Have you found operating with the large bureaucracy of having the government kind of backing funding, and on the flip side dealing with startups and kind of different cultures, different, a more agile, I guess, perhaps setup? Have you found dealing with kind of these different parties while running this?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm going to very tactfully say very little, which you can probably, if you listen to the silence on that one, you can probably guess the answer. It's really not easy. And in fact, when I initially, because we were a startup, I approached Scottish Enterprise and asked for a By Design grant. Anyone here got a By Design grant? Well, by design grants, you can get £5,000 towards a design project. You have to part fund it yourself. So I went in and I said, can I have £5,000 to do the Edge website? And they were initially pretty shocked that I was asking them for money, but I was saying, well, we're a startup and I don't have a decent website. But it was hugely interesting for me because I could see, and really, please don't tweet this. I could see how difficult it was to deal with Scottish Enterprise as a startup. And I actually did, but I was then able to feed that back to them. And now, obviously, I'm further down the line, and recently, I think many of you will know, Scottish Enterprise put £1 million in last year, and we've been discussing further funding with them, but it's not easy. It's probably no easier as a more established business than it was as a startup. The government, I would say, though, what I really should say is the government have been tremendously easy to deal with, and that's partly because the initial idea for Scottish Edge came from John Swinney, and the government have been very, very supportive of Edge. So they've actually been a real pleasure to deal with, I would say. Wee bit harder on the other side, but please don't quote me.
Yeah, we're having a kind of tweet ban for those 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your talk. It's really interesting. And also, if you do want to start the Gate Nights again, you should check out Soulfire Sounds.
Yep. Yeah, I know about them. Yeah.
But I had a question actually about applications for Edge. What is the one most frustrating thing that you keep seeing in applications?
Oh yeah, that's right, because I think you asked that and I didn't answer that. The thing that I hate is when people say, it's a personal hate, but actually we all hate this, is people say there's, the total addressable market is something like, or people say there's a worldwide market of £1 billion and I'm going to take 0.01% of it. It just means nothing. And that's the thing that really annoys us. There's a lot of people, when they do their market research, they go on Google and they quote the size of the industry. That means nothing. I'm actually much more interested in the local small conversations you've had. Because what I think is you build a business out, you don't start off with that, and you start off with this. So what's happening right now? Who are you talking to right now? Who's supporting you? Who's interested in what you're doing? So I think that's the key thing that's a bit of a pet hate for us at Edge, and so many people do it. Please don't please don't give us a paragraph off Google when you're talking about your potential market. Just drill it down into what you're doing right now. So that's my biggest thing, I think.
Evelyn, I mean, I work with entrepreneurs on a daily basis, and I've been to a number of different kinds of events, and I'm almost 30 and I look after a region, but I think that when I go to these events, there's information overload everywhere. So there's so many different funding options, there's so many different organisations to be part of. Is there, if I was an entrepreneur and I was starting my own company, is there like a standard ladder process that you should follow? Like, right, get some funding options, get some this, build your network, talk to 5 companies like this. Just to give people a bit of an idea on, instead of having all this
No, you're right.
right, as long as you've got these 5
And actually there's a huge number of there's, you could say almost too many involved in the ecosystem, but everybody seems to have a different role. And what we try and do is refer people to each other. So we do try and, so if you come into Edge and we're not right for you, we'll tell you who is right for you. So we would maybe map out to you where you would go. And most organisations, I would say, do that. So if you go into an organisation, they would tend to tell you who's the next person that you should be speaking to. But collectively, there is a sort of, it's actually called the Can Do Collective. It's all organisations involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. They've put together, there is a website and there is a guide available. I think it could go a step further. I think the ideal thing would be if you could go onto that website, put in your basic details, and then it would say to you, okay, these are the, and send you a roadmap, and everybody would get a personalised roadmap. So you're interested in, a university partnership, talk to Interface. You need an intern right now, go to AAI or Santander. You need to develop your website, approach the innovation team at Scottish Enterprise for a by design grant.
Yeah.
Now I know it wouldn't be easy to do that, but that's my vision, and I've actually spoken to the government about that. Actually, and said ultimately somebody should cough up the cash to do that, because we invest so much money in all these different organisations, but could we have something that actually helps people to navigate that?
Maybe my idea?
Yes.
I've got a question concerning startups. I also work in startups, and my question is concerning great ideas that are amazing, but not now, not for this moment. So sometimes you have got amazing ideas, and you say, this is not the time to invest in this idea, but maybe in 2 years, or maybe in 1 year, or maybe in 5 years. Did you experience this kind of feeling that you say, great idea, but...
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I have seen that as well,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes it's almost like, because there's a sort of saying around that it's really hard to be first to market, it's easier to be second.
Yeah.
So sometimes we've seen things that are just a little bit ahead of their time, and that's really tricky, actually. It's a really tricky one to support someone in. I think essentially because if you map out the journey is too hard and too long at this stage, and maybe needs too much money because they're going into something really innovative. So yeah, I do see that, and it is very tricky. I don't have an answer to that either. I'm afraid it's a difficult one.
Fantastic.
Hi. Just quickly to start just by thanking you for the support of TV Squared. And I took the Edge Pledge as one of the investors.
Brilliant.
For that.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess you've had a chance to speak to, I guess, literally thousands of startups. What would you say are the sort of characteristics of the founders that separate the successes from less successful businesses?
I think real belief and passion. Not accepting no for an answer. Also the ability, so where barriers come in their way, just finding a way around those barriers. Building a strong team around them makes a massive difference. Not being afraid to hire people better than yourself. Everybody in my team is better than I am at doing the jobs that they do. I love that. I love the fact that I'm in awe of them. I think you should be when you're building a team. So I think the ability to do that, so being able to leave your ego at the door and hire someone who's way better than you are, I think is really key. Also, I think real customer focus. So being constantly testing your proposition and constantly looking at, how could it be better? What are the things? Constantly asking yourself what value you're adding and can you add more value? Engaging and talking with your customers all the time. I mean, one of the things we try and do is, I think we get annoying to our customers and our winners because we're constantly sending them surveys. But I think that kind of thing where you're trying to take feedback all the time as well. But I think the key thing that, if I look at the entrepreneurs that have been successful in Edge, they also seem to be always curious, always learning, always prepared to go and search someone out and ask them answers to questions as well. So these are the kind of characteristics, and of course being nice. That's a whole load of things there.
So time for one more?
Yeah. Right. So I want to go back to the point where you mentioned about listening to your customer, but I have in my mind there are some companies who, which are like mostly research based at the moment, and they're trying to work something as like come up with something which is on the first on the market. So for example, we have Elon Musk who has SpaceX, and they're not really, he doesn't really have any, they're not really customers who buy stuff from SpaceX because they're building rockets, and who's going to buy a rocket? So at the moment actually. So I was wondering, like, if you want, because I'm thinking that would be something cool to do in the future. So what would be something to look at because while not having any customers?
I think maybe speak to the lady in front of you. Yeah, I think that's tricky. I think I would need more specifics around that to probably be able to answer that. Because I think even Elon Musk, he is building what he's building for a reason. So there's going to be a huge development in sort of cube satellites, small satellites in the future. So an awful lot, I think, of what he's doing is going to enable him to move into that market. And that's going to be massive in future, and an awful lot of communications around that and so on. So I think that I don't think he's doing anything without an end goal in mind. He just might not be revealing it. So I think that I would be very surprised if what you had in mind doesn't have some customers you could engage with even now, even if it's a very small niche.
Elon does have a customer, and that's NASA.
Yeah, he also helps the government send satellites to space, so he also takes money from them.
Fantastic, really good point. So I'll ask you in there for questions if that's okay. I'm sure everyone will be here for a bit longer.
Yes,
don't want to keep it too long. I'm sure people will be queuing up for questions. Massive thank you for coming down. Super interview, really enjoyed it. So round of applause for everyone. Okay.